Hey guys, it's Illuminostic. Second stream today. A lot going on, I guess. I actually wasn't even aware of the congressional hearings on the UFOs until like last night or this morning, I guess. And a lot of what I'm seeing out there in response to this, I mean, it's not really a new development because basically the whistleblower and all of the stuff that's being said has been floating around on the internet for quite a while already. Some of it's been out there for decades, but the reactions to it range from disturbing to disappointing, basically. And this is something that's even being noted by the major news agencies that, we've basically had the announcement that there are aliens and nobody really seems to care that much. And that's, a little bit weird. And I think that it's actually really not that surprising because my experience with confronting people with things that represent the unknown or that are too big for their minds or threatening or however, in some manner intimidating, people will put their heads in the sand and ignore it and just try to act like it's not there. So I think it's not that it's not a big deal. It's just that it's too much for people and they're already inundated with all this stuff. And a lot of the big popular narratives that I'm seeing, I find to be just absolutely ridiculous. One of them being that it's a distraction. Nobody cares, first of all. That's the thing. It's not really a distraction because nobody really cares. At least most people don't care. The other thing is that people that say that are kind of given their, demographic, I think, a little bit too much credit. Because what are you going to do? You know what I mean? You're just not distracted. Are you guys picking up arms and going and revolting and you know what I mean? Or are you somehow overthrowing, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Nothing. So I think the idea that people need to be distracted is kind of like this egoic kind of false sense of power that a lot of people have because people know that everything is fucked up. People know that their government is horrible. People know all this stuff and they're not doing a goddamn thing. And, there's nothing to distract them from. They can stare right into the face of the greatest, most atrocious evils on the entire planet. They have been for a long time, and they're not doing anything. They're not going to do anything. So that doesn't make any sense. And then we have the Project Bluebook idea, which is basically that there are holographic projections that are going to be staged to stage an alien invasion. That's also pretty stupid. Not because the technology isn't possibly there. In fact, I'm going to share a story where I had an experience along those lines in LA, maybe 10 years ago or so. But the problem with the staged invasion and that all of this is fake and all of these pilots from all these countries all over the world, a lot of people are saying it only happens in the United States. Not true. It's happened all over the world. It's happened in Russia. It's happened in China. It's happened, I don't know about Australia for sure. Definitely Canada. We've had leaders of several nations of, I think, France. I'm not sure about that one, but definitely Mexico and Canada and a few others threatened the U.S. with trade embargoes a decade or so ago because they were saying that, you guys have had alien technology and a dialogue with extraterrestrials for all these years. And if you don't admit it, we're going to put all these trade sanctions on you. Right? Probably because they're sick of the U.S. availing themselves of this alien technology that they can't get their hands on. Right, a little bit of jealousy. And by the way, you guys, I am eventually going to get to, Hopi prophecy stuff that connects actually to the Blue Star in the Masonic Lodge and the Sequoia here in South America and the Dogon in Africa and my own experiences. So this is going to be kind of wild, but I want to get this sort of pop culture narrative stuff kind of dealt with before we move on to the stuff that's more, far out. But the problem is the same with the flat earth conspiracy. Too many conspirators. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You can't, if there's too many conspirators, you can't call it a conspiracy. That's the first rule of conspiracy theory club. A successful conspiracy has to have few enough people. You have to answer qui bono, so who benefits, and they have motive. So there are certain things that have happened in the last few years that I don't want to mention because you all know what I'm talking about already, that do qualify as potential conspiracies. But the alien invasion does not, and all of these sightings do not, and, it just doesn't work. So there's that. And then there's also a theory that I really, really hate because, basically New Age spirituality, in my opinion, is kind of a bane upon the earth. If a New Ager tells you something about spirituality, you should write it down very carefully on a napkin, wipe your ass with it, throw it in a toilet, and flush it, because that's just what you do when New Agers say stuff. But the idea of malevolent entities, parasitical entities, I think are a crutch and an excuse for people that are trying to do some spiritual bypassing and don't want to actually deal with their dirty laundry and deal with their traumas and work through all their stuff and actually put the work in. They would rather somebody just, twiggle a amethyst crystal around, burn some sage, and tell them they're all better. And that's just never going to work. So, along those same lines, the idea that these aliens are malevolent. Have you guys seen the videos? Have you seen the videos? These UAPs, as they're calling them now, their maneuverability is such that probably one of them by itself could take out the entire United States Air Force. Nobody knows what the energy source is. Nobody knows how to hit them. You couldn't hit them. You can't stop them. You can't catch them. So theoretically, in a very short period of time, one single craft or whatever they are could take out the entire United States Air Force, right? There is nothing we could do to stop them. So what is your theory about what are they waiting for? They've been here 50 years or something, we're thinking, and they're just sitting around waiting because they have nothing better to do? No. The only real explanation for that is that they are benevolent, and they're either waiting until people are in a position where they are ready for it, or, and this is where I think the answer lies, partly because there are Hopi prophecy. The Freemasons have I guess a prophecy. I don't really want to call it that, but the great revolution prepared for by the ages will begin to march, that has for its aims the amelioration of mankind from servitude and slavery and bigotry and religion and all of this crap. And it revolves around the blue star, right? There's theories that have to do with these star people in all of these different cultures that align. And I also had a personal experience with a vision that I had once where I encountered these entities, and they explained to me that it would be at the very last moment, because there are sort of rules which shouldn't be interpreted as intergalactic law. Because what happens is if people evolve to a certain point, they don't need to be governed, and they know it. So when you think about a race of aliens that, is 10,000 years more advanced, 1,000,000 years more advanced, they have no reason to have hierarchy. It would be such a ridiculous insult. And so that's another thing about the malevolence. If they're malevolent, why would they care about free will? What kind of rules or laws will restrict them from doing what they want? The suggestion that there are other alien races here defending us from the Greys or whatever is kind of ridiculous, because it's one thing to suggest that a race of aliens might see us the way that we see whales or something. And we don't necessarily interfere in the day-to-day business of endangered species. But once it gets to the point where they're actually going to get wiped out, then we might actually do something. And so just thinking about this logically and rationally, that's really the only explanation for this. And it's what I was told. And then 10 years after I had this vision, I met with North American and South American indigenous spiritual leaders that had a message about the star tribes. They said the same exact thing. And then later I got a call from this girl that I had not told the story to. I didn't have a YouTube channel back then. And she had this dream where these aliens in business suits told her exactly the same spiel that they told me. And again, it all is collaborated or corroborated by all of these indigenous prophecies and different blue star Kachina variations that are found all over the world and throughout history. It all seems to revolve pretty heavily around Sirius B. And so there was another thing about the malevolence that I just thought about that I didn't mention that's pretty important. But yeah, so, one of the theories is that, they're restricted by free will. They're not allowed to intervene. You hear this from New Agers a lot. And it's, there's some obvious fallacies there. Like if it's intervening in our free will, that's the problem. I'm talking about on the part of the malevolent entities. What do they care about our free will if they're malevolent? That's the whole point of being malevolent. And even us taking that a step further, if there are rules and laws that are, supposed to protect malevolent entities, do not care about rules and laws. So if you really just kind of think this stuff through, a lot of the ideas about it seem to just disintegrate. And what we're left with is actually something that is much less frightening than a lot of people are suggesting. The idea that they're not aliens at all and even just, projections from our higher selves or from our future selves, we have really no idea about that. And given the state of technology and the rapid evolution of technology, and the fact that, if you consider Moore's law and the exponential development of technology, it's going to be able to do things that we can't even imagine now. So even the idea of sending like holograms back in time, if it's not possible to physically send a human being, is pretty viable. Yeah. And then, people also have ideas about like, well, they're harvesting our negative energy and stuff. Okay, well, if you're a being that lives on energy, there's an inexhaustible supply of any energy that a magician might need. In the Western occult mystery tradition, we've known that for thousands of years. That's the reason why, and any real magician knows that blood sacrifice is not necessary. It's completely dumb because you can just transmute energy. It's been proven recently that you can actually transmute mercury into gold. So, if you can transmute elements, you can definitely transmute raw energy. So there's no reason for a being that feeds on energy to need to produce it from a human. It's just, this is not a comic book. That's another way, I think, to kind of evaluate and sift through these ideas. When people's ideas sound like comic book fantasies, they probably are. And that's also one of the dead giveaways of like new agey ideas. They just sound like the fodder of fantasy comic books. This is not The Hobbit, you guys. This is not a drill. This is not a test. This is the real, actual universe in 3D. And, things are going to make sense in a way that corresponds to, life and reality. It's not going to just suddenly transform into a chapter from a fantasy movie all of a sudden. It's just not happening. It's just not realistic. But I do want to talk about this Bluebook type experience that I had some years ago because it was really, really weird. And to this day, I don't have an explanation for it, but I am certain that it actually happened. I had gone to LA in order to prove that I could do something, basically. I really don't want to get into the details of it, but I was just testing the capacities of my consciousness to do things in sort of non-ordinary ways, unconventional methods. And on the way home, we were traveling, so I just pulled under an underpass and we set up our tent. And when we woke up, I noticed there was a helicopter circling over us. And I thought, well, that's got nothing to do with us. It's just a coincidence. We're in LA. They're probably hunting down, criminal or something. And I drove over to a Walmart parking lot because I needed to park and call my stepfather. So I'm on the phone with my stepfather, and there's that helicopter again, flying above the car. And so we leave the parking lot, and the helicopter is above the car for like 40 miles or something heading back to Colorado. And I'm thinking like somebody has set me up for some kind of crime because I knew I hadn't done anything. Or, for some reason I've got a mark on my head, like something's going on here. But eventually it's just gone. And before I ever mentioned it, my girlfriend mentioned it. So I knew, for a split second there, I was thinking, maybe I've gone schizophrenic. And I'm imagining it, but then my girlfriend says, that helicopter's been following us all morning, hasn't it? You know what I mean? So that kind of ruled that out. And then when I got to Durango, Colorado, I went into the local New Age bookstore, and this lady that was associated with this group of Native Americans that I had this conference with in New Mexico in Farmington a number of years ago. So I'd been kind of talking to her, even though, you know, I obviously have kind of a disdain for New Agey stuff in general. But when I walked in, the first thing she said to me is they've been testing holographic helicopters in LA this weekend. She had no idea where I had gone. We hadn't told anyone anything. You know, definitely no one that was connected to her. It was, you know, pretty mind-blowing that she said that. And there was a lot of stuff, actually, that she told me that actually turned out to have some kind of legitimate basis. It was really surprising. But I never really got to the bottom of it. And I'll tell you one more little bit of that story because I know I haven't really shared this on this channel yet. One of the things that she was telling me is that the military was setting up some kind of grid in the mountains of Colorado. I don't know what it was for. What does it mean by military grid? I don't know what the hell she was even talking about really exactly. But coincidentally, I happened to go up to the college to take a rock to the geology professors to get it identified. And the door was only open because they were loading a band in. Otherwise, it would have been locked down because this was a top secret conversation they were having. And so I go upstairs and I walk into the office and I'm behind these two guys. So for a second, they don't know I'm there. And they have a map and they're like, so, all right, the military's got their grid set up in this part of Silverton here. And I was like, holy shit, this is real. This lady's telling me about. So, you know, there were little things like that that kind of provoked me to take her kind of seriously. But then I met her friends. And, you know, I've told this story many times on this channel, so I don't want to go into a lot of depth about it. But in case you're new, I'll give an overview. You can find videos all over the channel. I've made a bunch over the years about this story. So there was a meeting in New Mexico in 2010 or 2011. Pretty sure it was 2011. And the gist of it basically was these Native American spiritual leaders. One of them was a Sioux Sundance chief. There were representatives of South American tribes and even like a Japanese Zen Buddhist guy for some reason. I don't know how he tied into all this exactly. Thematically, you know, his conceptual continuity wasn't quite on the level with everybody else. But their message was that the star tribes are interdimensional beings, not so much extraterrestrial aliens, but interdimensional beings that the ancient peoples all over the earth had some kind of contact with. And they claimed that human beings, at least some of us, are at least occasionally in contact with these interdimensional beings, and that a lot of the advances in technology and revelations of a spiritual nature are actually transmitted to us from these interdimensionals. I think that it's worthy of noting that the word interdimensional is kind of a loose categorization, and time is a dimension. So if it was indeed a transmission from our future selves, even in a holographic form, which would be a lot easier, right? Just to send programs back, holographic programs, to go and try to talk some sense into us. Like, if you guys continue on this course, you're all going to be dead in X amount of time or whatever. You know what I mean? So yeah, the one thing that confuses me about this theory of interdimensional aliens that aren't physically here is that we do seem to have craft flying around, and they do appear to be metal. In fact, I've seen them several times in my life. The first time I was delivering pizza, and I just happened to kind of glance like under the visor, I guess, and up at the cloud, and this little tiny teardrop shaped metal object just kind of flashed out from behind the cloud and then zipped back. And after I met with these Native Americans in New Mexico, I was driving home, and I had, I guess, a sort of vision that would turn out to be pretty significant over the years. Man, I wish that parrot would shut the fuck up. It always does this at this time of day when the sun goes down. It starts squawking. My theory is that it would be drawing all the other parrots to it so that they could all go to sleep for the night if it was actually wild. But anyways, really distracting. I had this kind of vision that would turn out to be really significant. And it would take me years and years and years and years to get any kind of insight or anything resembling an answer about it. But it was basically what I would describe as a geisha with like long black horns. And I'm not saying demonic. A lot of people say that, like, oh, this was a demon. It was very beautiful, and I did not get any malevolent feelings from it. And I also didn't think much of it. It didn't say anything. It was just a still image that was just kind of in my mind's eye. And I thought, that is really crazy, but I didn't really think too much of it. And I'm driving home, and this whole experience, like, mind you, I'm leaving a lot of stuff out. There were all these crazy synchronicities. At one point, I didn't have money because I wasn't planning to spend the night, and I needed a room. And Golden Light Eagle, the Sioux Sundance chief, I just heard his voice in my head telling me to go to 331 and sleep there. And I was like, I'm not paying attention to voices in my head. I'm not doing this. I did it, though. Went to the room. The door was cracked open. Went inside. The bed sheet was kind of pulled back a little bit. Expensive room, too. I mean, it's crazy to rent it and not sleep in it. Don't worry, we're not coming back. I hear in my head, you know what I mean? And they had been telling us that part of the deal is that the unused capacities of consciousness that have been dormant are going to awaken first in a subsect of the population and then at large. This is why, they've done brain scans of people who are on large doses of psychedelics, and they have electrical activity in parts of the brain we don't normally use. That's what those parts of the brain do. And that's why, ayahuasca has this history of being called telepamine and telepathine, the alkaloids in it. So anyways, that happened. And no one came up to the room. And that morning after I went down to the dining room to have breakfast, he just kind of came up and put his hand on my shoulder. How'd you sleep last night? I was like, man, didn't ask anything. Maybe I should have, but I didn't say a word. I was just like, and that's, like I said, there was a ton, the whole weekend with these guys was like that, like constantly. So it shook me up a little bit. I'm a pretty open-minded person, and, I've been through a lot, but that weekend shook me up pretty severely. So on the way home, I thought, well, it sure would be nice to go and sit by the river. So I pulled over into this park where you can go down to the river by Engineer Mountain in Durango, Colorado. And it's a terrible place to go because it has a uranium dump on it, and like the rocks are bleached white from the radiation and stuff. And I go and I sit down by the river, and I'm just trying to relax. My girlfriend and my dog are behind me playing, and just kind of like meditating, thinking about everything. And I hear this voice in my head because I had been experiencing synchronicities of an extraordinarily improbable level for, weeks at this point. I knew it wasn't in my head because a lot of the things were like physical objects. We were discussing the number 11, and then we realized the ruler my girlfriend was working with had 2 11s on it. She called me and said she saw bears in the yard, and then I pulled the insulation out where I was working, and 3 bear claws fell out and stuff like that, where there was like a paper trail. You know what I mean? There's no way I could wake up and just go, that didn't happen. Because the stuff was like still in the sock drawer or whatever, you know what I mean? So I'm sitting by the river, and I hear this voice in my head that says, all of the things that you've seen and you're still in disbelief, what is it going to take? And I said, it's just too much. I am not prepared to accept that, that I'm in telepathic rapport with aliens, or that anyone is. And all the rest of it too. There's a lot of other details that I haven't shared in the interest of not having a 6-hour live stream. And it said, okay, stand up and turn around. And I knew I was fucked. So I stood up and turned around, and I saw the same exact little teardrop shaped metallic shiny little vessel right above the, what do you call them, mesa, that I had seen 10 years earlier when I was 21 years old and delivering pizza. And as soon as I saw it, I thought, that's not really there. And my girlfriend goes, holy shit, do you see that? And the second she acknowledged that thing, zoom, it's gone. And I instantly understood the whole point of that was to demonstrate for me that this is real. Still to this day, though, obviously there's a lot of questions. Like, I'm just some regular jerk off. What the hell do, telepathic aliens want with me? What is the point of all this stuff? And in fact, that area, Durango, Colorado, around this time period, there was a sort of mass contact experience that involved myself and at least, 6 people that I ran into the next day. Basically, everyone I saw before I could say anything. So it's not like I started describing this experience and they're like, oh yeah, that happened to me too. That's not what happened. In every case, as soon as I saw these people, they started telling me, like last night I came home and there was this little 4-foot gray being that was kind of translucent with big black eyes, and I threw a rock at it and the rock disappeared. That was Joe, the old Mexican gangbanger bandito guy. And everyone I ran into, our sound man was working. He encountered what appears to be a gray in his bathroom that night. My pot grower friend came over with his son, and they had both seen this thing run through the garden. So, all this crazy stuff is going on. This conference happens in this town. Part of the conference actually was that we went out to the desert near Aztec, New Mexico. And we went to what is supposed to be a landing site. And there's this big concrete block out in the desert. And they've dug down the side of it, and it goes down like 20 feet. And that doesn't make any sense. And then there's like a little metal, like part of a pole still in there. Like they must have attached another pole to it. And the only reason to build this and sink this thing 20 feet into the ground would be to drag something really, really heavy across the desert. So the story was that I think 1946, somewhere around there, there was a UFO crash, and it was seen by a bunch of farmers. Some of them were still living at the time, if barely. And, these are not the kind of people that would have had anything invested in telling some insane story to their conservative Christian cowboy neighbors about a UFO crash in the middle of the desert. There's nothing to gain from that for them. They would have been branded complete nut jobs. And so they actually also described biologics, as they said in the Congressional hearing, that they had actually pulled bodies out of these UFOs. And there was a ridiculous number of witnesses, like 12 or 16 or something like that. And that's another thing, when I was talking about the fact that the conspiracy, there's just too many people involved. It's just not realistic to say that, those farmers were like what government plants back in the 1940s. They were paid shills or whatever. You know what I mean? Like some of this stuff is it's just too dumb to entertain, really. And then actually this whole, since we're talking about the theme of the experience of interacting with these teardrop shape, apparently telepathic alien drones or whatever the hell they are. I guess about a year after the experience down by the river where I saw that second little teardrop shaped vessel, I was in California in Lake County, and I had married a girl, and we were laying on the deck and we were talking about all this stuff. And, I was like, so, even thinking about these Animus River. Huh. Yeah. The Animus River got completely ruined by a mine collapse. It's just terrible because it was such a beautiful river, and it had like giant brown trout in it and rainbow trout, and it was just a great place to fish. And I guess a mine busted and flooded the thing. And again, you guys, if you're curious about all the other details and these stories I've left out, the videos are on my channel. I think I've told most of the stories more or less complete. Although there's always little details that I remember that kind of add some interest, I guess. So where was that? Okay, so California, Lake County, I'm talking about this and how if you so much as think about them, you sometimes will see them. And as soon as I mentioned that, it looked like a star. It was nighttime, so I can't really say that it was teardropped, but it looked just like a star, but it was doing all these insane maneuvers. Like it didn't just like fly straight like a satellite or do anything that made any sense, which is another reason that I question whether this particular phenomena is actually extraterrestrial and not some kind of manifestation of collective unconscious, which is what Jung or what Terence McKenna posited that this experience actually is, which I'm totally open to that possibility. I have no idea what's going on here. Really, I don't think anyone does exactly. So I said that and it appeared. And of course, her eyes got super wide and I said, could it really be here for us? And the second I said that, it stopped dead directly above us. And I realized that once it stopped, it looked exactly like a star. Like you would never notice it. Just another star in the sky. So that was interesting. But then another year after that, I was walking down the driveway with the drummer from the band that I was in. We'd been working together at a pot farm, and we were walking up the driveway, and I started telling her that story and some of the rest of the stuff that had happened. I guess the subject of UFOs had come up while we were working. And I said, sometimes when I'm talking about them, they'll just appear, and I see her eyes like completely bug out of her head, and I follow her line of sight and look up, and once again, there's one of those little star-sized yellow lights doing all these ridiculous maneuvers and stuff. That look on her face, I'll never forget that as long as I live. So part of the reason for this, sidetrack down memory lane is that I don't necessarily think that there's any one explanation for all of these phenomena. We tend to lump them together as, UFOs, and that's sort of an ambiguous term in and of itself. So, I guess the bullet point of the presentation is if these are actual alien invaders and the UAPs or UFOs or whatever terminology you prefer, the videos that we've seen are real. These things are capable of taking out our entire military in the blink of an eye. If they haven't done that yet, it means they're benevolent. End of story. No argument. Like, what are they waiting for? It just doesn't make any sense to argue against that. What are they waiting for? And it's not like we aren't being told they're here. It's not like they're really hiding. Golden Light Eagle, actually the Sioux Sundance chief that was sort of the leader of this group of Native Americans. You guys can look him up too. He's definitely still alive and on the internet. I think he has a Star Knowledge YouTube channel. He was also on Ancient Aliens. That was crazy too, because the last time I'd seen him, he was actually supposed to do my wedding. And we asked him what he wanted to be paid, and he said 10 elk teeth. So we actually got these elk teeth to pay him. And then on the morning of the wedding, he didn't show up, and I was really upset, obviously, because we had no one to do the ceremony, I thought. But then it turned out that there was a Luciferian high priestess that was licensed in Colorado to legally do weddings. So we ended up having this Luciferian style wedding ceremony up in the peaks of the Rockies, where she cast a circle and invoked the dragon and all this stuff. And, this girl's family were all like upper middle class yuppies. It was absolutely amazing that it turned out that way. But unfortunately, what had actually happened is that Golden Light Eagle had lost his son, and otherwise I would have seen him again. But the time before that, I saw him at the alien convention thing. That's not exactly what it was. It was actually about 1111 and symmetry and synchronicity and the star tribes. And so when I had seen him there, one of the things that he showed us was this bar, like this metal bar that he said had the language of one of the Star Tribe people, like the characters from it, etched into it. And I never watched television. I never, ever, 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 ever watched television. So for some reason, I was sitting in front of a TV and I turned it on. And there's Golden Light Eagle on Ancient Aliens holding that bar and explaining it to the History Channel. That was quite a shock to see that this, part of the story had gotten mainstream attention. Yeah, I don't really know what he's up to these days. I haven't followed him very closely. Maybe some of you guys want to check him out and see what Golden Light Eagle is up to. Definitely, I experienced almost undeniable telepathy with him. If it's a coincidence that I was given that room number and then walked up there and it was empty and I stayed in there and no one came, that's all a coincidence. It could be, I guess. But it sounds, pretty improbable. And I know for certain it was his room because his necklace was in the armoire or the TV stand sitting in there. So there's no question about it. Yeah. And so I guess, the general just, poo-poo, it's way crazier than all that. Trust me. I've told the story a bunch of times on the channel. I don't want to be too redundant. But there was a whole bunch of just completely crazy stuff that happened. And it went on for months, actually. It was a pretty long period of time. And apparently this is kind of a common experience for mystics. It's generally, it's true of Terence McKenna. It's true of Robert Anton Wilson. It's true of St. John of the Cross, Aleister Crowley, me. Anyone I can find that seems to have embarked on this path and successfully pierced the veil, you have this peak of, parapsychological experiences and all this stuff, and then it never happens again on that level. Like it stays with you, more intermittent and, but that seems to be a common thing where there's this peak of the experience and then you retain some of it, but not in its entirety. Where were we in the story, though? I feel like there was a little bit more that we could... Well, I mean, there's a lot more. Oh, by the way, you guys, do me a favor. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. I'm actually going to do a secret stream when I get off of here, and we are looking at Masonic degree number 28 in some depth. So $10 and up tiers. I'm demonetized, so any support I get comes from my viewers, and there are options for one-time contribution in the chat as well. Oh, I remember now. So the bullet point of this presentation, the takeaway, the overall overarching theme, and I would encourage you guys, if you haven't seen my Hopi Prophecy video, where, I talk about how I put together the fact that, I mentioned Robert Anton Wilson earlier. He had this experience where he thought he was telepathically communicating with an alien from Sirius in 1974. He wrote a book called Cosmic Trigger 1, The Final Secret of the Illuminati, which does indeed have those kind of secrets in it. And he tells you where to find it in Aleister Crowley's Book of Lies with a bunch of very, very strong hints. Right after that book was published, his daughter was murdered, and he changed his story and said that he was insane. So I'm very suspicious of that entire scenario. And then also, I had an experience where, I mentioned this geisha with the big black horns that I had the vision of when I was driving down the road that time, that I didn't figure out for a long time. I had three different people. Let's see, my girlfriend said that she saw it hovering behind me while I was playing guitar. And then my friend Dustin saw it always when I was playing guitar. And then also a Maori kid, I don't remember his name, but he told me about it when I was walking out of a bar, all in the space of about 3 weeks. All these people said they saw this like purple horn thing floating behind me when I'm playing the guitar, which I'm like, that's metal as hell. So I guess Satan is my spirit animal or something. I didn't put it together with this vision that I had at all. And I came down to South America and drank ayahuasca. I'm walking along, and that thing is in front of me, and just as vivid as the first time I saw it. And I hear Pachamama say, would you like to know what this is? And I said, yes, of course. And immediately it hit me that the thing my girlfriend had described and that Dustin had described and this Maori kid had described, that was it. It was the thing from the vision. And she said, well, it's you. In the same way that a single object can be in two places at once in a laboratory in physics, souls are like this as well. People think of reincarnations and whatnot, but it's more like a hologram. And in a sense, we're all one soul having an illusory sake of being divided for the sake of union, to experience union. But there are levels of this fragmentation of this one soul. And so this is you on a gas giant that didn't become a red dwarf star between Sirius A and Sirius B, and it didn't become a red dwarf star because of the influence of the two other stars. Kept it a gas giant, right? So I got a little bit more information about the nature of this being, what it does and whatnot. It has to do with consciousness and the evolution of consciousness. And so about a week later, I checked, and it turned out that that information was correct, that a paper had just been published after the ceremony, after I received this information, that said that, they feel like they've confirmed that the third celestial body in the Sirius system is a gas giant that didn't become a red dwarf star because of the influence of the other stars. And there's no way in hell I could make that up. You know what I mean? I don't know anything about astrophysics. So for me to have randomly generated that out of the mush of my brain, you know what I mean? It just doesn't, I just don't see how that could fucking happen. So again, but we're talking about Sirius, right? And of course I had noticed this over the years, but then we have the Hopi prophecy, and this is where it starts getting really weird. When I was doing research into these beings on Sirius, I found references to it in the writings of Anne Bailey or Alice Bailey. I can never remember. I think it's Alice Bailey. Brilliant woman, absolutely a genius, student of Helena Blavatsky. But she wrote about these beings on Sirius, in Sirius system that transmit this certain type of knowledge. And it was crazy because it was exactly the same information, almost verbatim, that I had received from ayahuasca. And so I eventually came to discover that same blue star is the blue star in the Masonic lodges. The reason that is so crazy is that the Hopi, they have a blue star prophecy, but they also recognize other people that are keepers of this secret, Alice and Bailey. So it's both things. Thank you. That the other keepers of this secret knowledge, they identify them with a secret handshake. So we have the Hopi with the blue star. We have the Freemasons with the blue star. It represents Sirius. Secret handshake to identify each other. Totally disparate cultures. There's no way they ever had any contact and exchanged this information. So that is mind-blowingly fucking crazy. And then the Dogon, also, it's even weird that their name is Dogon because it's the dog star. So it's almost like dog on. It's kind of weird. But not as weird as the fact that they have a star chart, or a chart of star systems, 7 star systems away. And they actually claim to have received cannabis from an alien race from Sirius again. And then after I put this video together of the connections between Sirius and this certain type of knowledge, I discovered that the Sequoia here in Ecuador, Peru, actually also claim to be in telepathic communication with alien beings from Sirius when they drink ayahuasca. So I'm sure I'm not done plumbing that particular rabbit hole. But, the gist of all of this is that my opinion, after all of these decades of, I actually took initiation in some of these secret societies at one point. I've studied all the different systems of mysticism and religion and different forms of meditation and all the psychedelics. And I live in the jungle where I've studied shamanism and ritual magic in the Hermetic tradition. And I keep abreast of the sciences. And you know what I mean? That's all I do. And this constant contemplation and refining of, cognitive abilities and always trying to maintain critical thinking and second guess everything. And as much skepticism as I can mutter, no matter how weird shit gets, my basic takeaway from this is that it's it has to do with the evolution of consciousness. Whatever this contact with these alien beings is, they're not here to enslave us because, you know, one more time, because this is so important. If they were here to do that, and they have the kind of technology we have observed, we would already be enslaved. There's no way, there's no reason for them to just sit around and wait, because, as I said, one of those UAPs that I've seen on video could take out, you know, the entire Air Force. No one could hit it. It might take it all day, but it would wipe out one of them by itself, wipe out the entire United States Air Force. Nothing we can do. We are completely defenseless. If they're here, they're already completely in control of everything. So it's kind of a wild situation. Because I think it's basically a certainty at this point that they are here. And I think we can also be pretty certain that the government is about to fully disclose that fact. And we're just waiting with bated breath for the actual emergence of, you know, a flight of UFOs above the White House or something. And some of you guys that watch this channel are pretty young and might not remember some of the major incidents that have occurred in the United States and Russia. Again, people keep saying that it only happens in the US, and it's not true. It's not true at all. One of the craziest things that ever happened in the UFO field, with the best evidence, a bunch of military officers all gave testimony under oath that this red triangle was floating around above this forest, dripping some kind of molten stuff out of it that never quite hit the ground. And I don't know, there was like 16 witnesses or something, and it's all kinds of crazy. I mean, I'm sure you guys can find that. It's probably pretty famous. But I got kind of derailed on that rant. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, you know, if they were here to enslave the human race, we would already be totally fucked. And I know I keep hearing this Project Bluebeam thing, but that's, you know, the kind of stuff that you have to suspect probably came from the church, because the church is going to have a really big problem if suddenly it's an absolute certainty that the earth isn't at the center of, you know what I mean? It's just the old religions that are way past their shelf life, right? They are way overdue for extermination. You know, hopefully Bluebeam will vaporize what's left of them and send them back to the heart of the stars from which they truly belong. Because, you know, the real truth, I think, about the idea of spirit and consciousness is that it emanates from the stars. We are star stuff, is how the Navajo say it, star stuff. And, you know, we're stardust, and our consciousness is starlight. And that's it, you know? So, yeah, that's no big mystery. It's no big mystery. It's obvious to any initiate, really any open-minded, really thinking person. Then that's, you know, where this is all headed, I think. The truth is that there's been a veil pulled over our eyes. The truth has been occulted from us, not by evil and dark forces from another dimension, but by human beings that seek to control. And they have done so successfully. And the suppression of consciousness is absolutely fundamental to control over the populations. People that have attained to a certain level of consciousness do not need hierarchy anymore. You know, hierarchy is something that we have retained from our ape ancestors, right? Where there was an alpha male and everyone followed the alpha male. This is why people have such unrealistic perceptions and investments in the idea of a president. You know, people blame the president for things that have absolutely nothing to do with him, and they also give them credit for things that have absolutely nothing to do with them. You know, they have all kinds of unrealistic hopes and expectations of this, you know, puppet monkey that really is just there as a scapegoat at this point, and really nothing more, you know? So the absolute nightmare of the dominator culture is that we will elevate our consciousness just a tiny bit to where we're no longer governed by the animal soul, as it would be expressed in Jewish mysticism. We All we have to do is go up one circuit in Leary's 8 model circuit, and we don't need to be governed anymore and refuse to be governed. There's no need for hierarchy. And that is absolutely my opinion, that all of this control and the social agitation and all of the division and stuff, it's all being propagated because of the fact that we are so close to making an evolutionary leap that renders the overlords irrelevant. And I think that it seems awfully strange to me that, and you guys can check this, there's records of me talking about this from 5 years ago, right? Where I said that, I had this vision of these aliens that said that, at the very last minute when we were on the verge of extinction, they would show up. And here we are on the verge of extinction, and it seems they've showed up. So, that's pretty compelling to me. And I've been thinking for quite some time that the only way that we can turn this around at this point is alien intervention, if they happen to be benevolent. Because, they have disrupted our communication, right? Like my channel is shadow banned hard. And there are lots of other people experiencing that as well. And the technology is so good that they profile my keyboard stroking, my speed, all of that stuff, and they can tell if it's you at another device. And they've told us this. It's not conspiracy theory. So, you know what I mean? They have very, very, very good control over communication, the dissemination of information, the distribution of technology, access to technology. And the reality is that the higher up the totem pole of power you go, the higher the concentration of psychopaths. This isn't hard to understand what's going on here. So we're at a serious disadvantage because we can't really even freely communicate. Alien intervention with a neutral or benevolent species could fix all of that, because they're going to have 100,000 years more experience designing and implementing governments, or cultivating the kind of consciousness, better yet, that negates the necessity for government. They're going to have economic systems or systems of commerce that blow everything that we've ever conceived of out of the water. They're going to have health technology that's going to blow everything we have out of the water, right? And it's going to pose some problems, because if people no longer die, or it takes hundreds or even thousands of years for them to die, which already we have that technology on deck. Like, that's part of the reason for the population reduction agenda. Not only are there too many people, but they're about to live, all of the people that can afford it are about to live as long as they want, basically. Because we have already implemented cell degradation reversal technologies in the eyes, and it's just a little bit of a stretch before we're able to apply that technology to the entire system. And so we have AI about to render everybody obsolete. We have life extension that's about to make sure that no one, all the people that are here already could stay here. And I don't think I mentioned also that the fact that AI and alien intelligence and artificial intelligence, have appeared on the scene exactly in step with each other. And I'm not saying that there's any direct causal relationship. That's more a statement about the higher order symmetry in the universe and how all that sort of thing works. But at any rate, I have been talking for too long. My throat is starting to hurt. I think that this is a positive development. Otherwise, we would already all be enslaved. We'd already all be wiped out. It's not staged because there's way too many conspirators. That is coming from, people who are small-minded and afraid and religious and whatever, and just can't handle the idea of aliens, chicken shits. So don't worry about that. And I think that, if anything, it just has to do with the evolution of consciousness and the forced evolution of consciousness to an extent, because we really have to re-engineer a lot of aspects of our society and culture if we expect to survive. And at this point, the overlords have absolutely way too much control for us to do it from the ground up. So it's got to happen from above. Cheers, guys. See you again soon.